and let's get started if we can. So here's our first panel. I'm very excited to have both Richard Watson as well as Kris Lovejoy on here. Richard, I know you're coming in from Maribel, France, so thank you for joining. I know you're on PTO as well. Thank you. Say hello from Maribel if you would.
Yeah, it's beautiful here in Maribel in France, but pleasure to be here, Dave, and thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. Thank you for joining. I thought you'd be wearing a sweater and everything there, so I guess it's
I
not
was 30 minutes ago.
You were okay, perfect. And Kris Lovejoy, thank you for joining as well. Really appreciate you. You've been a friend of NightDragon, both you and Richard, for so long. I know you've both been friends as well. Kris, you run Kyndryl's security, cybersecurity business. Now, Richard, you run EY. Kris, you formerly came from EY as well. Maybe start with you, Kris. Tell a little bit about your role and a little bit about Kyndryl just for a minute, and then Richard, you do the same.
Sure. So Dave, thank you so much for having me. It's funny. I was just thinking that I've always said that, a good security person always has like death-defying hobbies, and you're both proving the point, right? You're skiing in France, and Dave, you were just saying you were snowboarding off the Matterhorn or something along those lines. I got to add though that now I'm going to have the jamming out to like techno music has got to be added to that list as well. So good job with that. A lot of self-confidence. Anyway, I am with Kyndryl. So for those who don't know Kyndryl is the other half of IBM. So IBM split into two parts just over a year ago. They carved off the services organization into what is now Kyndryl. So Kyndryl has a focus, it's a big company, it's about 92,000 people, and we're really focused on 6 key areas, one of which is obviously security and resilience. So I'm on the phone, where I lead the security business line, if you will, and also look after commercial security. But we're also focused on, core infrastructure management. So that's all along mainframe, as well as hybrid cloud environments. We've got a practice that does artificial intelligence, data, analytics, also networking and digital workplace services. So those are our core focus areas today, all around technology integration, implementation, and run services.
Kris, you're one of my favorite people. Thank you for joining. Congrats on your new role. And by the way, for the record, I'm in Miami Beach at the moment. That's why you got the techno music. I was previously at the Matterhorn, so all good. Anyway, I had to throw that in there. Richard, tell a little bit about your role at EY and what you're doing these days.
Thanks, Dave. Yeah, I'm Richard Watson, the global cybersecurity leader at EY, based out of Australia. It's also look after Asia Pac. EY now has about 12,500 dedicated cybersecurity professionals around the world. We focus on consulting, so traditional advice around cyber strategy and risk, but also transformation, implementing some of the large technology solutions that we now have in this market, and increasingly operate, so managed services. So really an end-to-end program around cybersecurity, working with some of the world's largest companies, but also government departments as well, to help reduce cyber risk and protect customers and citizens around the world.
Richard, thank you. You've been a great friend to NightDragon too, and congrats on your new role. Between EY and Kyndryl, is there any Fortune 500 companies you don't touch? I'm not sure. It's pretty close.
Well, all our audit clients we don't touch, but
maybe. But Kyndryl might now. So
yes,
there
true.
You go.
Sure.
Kris, maybe start with you. Is there a way for you to summarize 2022 just for a minute from your perspective? Richard, you do the same. Like, what did you see? I gave a little my perspective. Like, how do you summarize it for a second and, give everybody your vantage point, because you see so many things.
Yeah, no, and I think your setup is great. And, I sum it up in one word, which is complexity. What we saw is, coming out of the COVID period, it had been a lot of exuberant innovation, and very little security control had been built into the technology that we rolled out. So you've got a lot of, folks that are becoming increasingly concerned about the, sort of the attack surface having been, becoming so much larger. And we're seeing, kind of the effect of that, within the context of the ransomware events that you touched on. regulatory authorities who are sort of watching this are responding with lots and lots of regulation. And so you've got, a lot of technical debt that's been built up. You've got a lot of, regulatory stuff we've got to navigate. And then meanwhile, we're kind of looking at a potential recession. So everybody's got their brakes on, investment. And meanwhile, you've got the boards of directors who are becoming more involved as well. They're looking to see, as you pointed out, from an audit, from a security, what is it that you're doing? What are the value of the investments we're making? And so I think, for CISOs, those of us who are in the trenches, we just feel a lot of just anxiety about this complexity and how do we get our arms around it?
Yeah, it's a good way to summarize it. I empathize with the CISOs out there, and it's a very tough job. Richard, what's your take on 2022?
Yeah, I agree with both you and Kris. I think when we talk to companies, are worried about three things: ransomware, good old-fashioned business email compromise, and then increasingly supply chain and software supply chain. So really, a lot of the cyber programs that companies are spinning up are really in pursuit of managing those three risks above all else. I think, in the face of complexity, simplification has become a key theme in the market. And I think it's what's leading to what you described as best of suite, or, the sort of heyday of the platform players, and you named most of them earlier on. But really, a lot of companies trying to move away from this kind of best of breed, huge total cost of ownership, a lot of complexity integrating all of that stuff, creates a lot of challenges actually navigating a cyber incident when you've got so many different software components to manage. So a real opportunity for those that have end-to-end integrated, cloud-based technology to steal the market, particularly after sort of M&A events or, other big strategic transactions. And I agree. I think the tide is turning on cyber spend. So whilst budgets will go up, I think it's getting a little bit harder to justify those budgets. There's no longer sort of blank checks available for CISOs. There really has to be a business case around risk reduction or reduction in total cost of ownership to justify some of that. And so you do have this paradigm at the moment where, yes, boards are getting more and more focused on this issue, but it's getting a little bit harder to spend the money, actually, if you're a CISO or a CIO trying to build the control environment.
Richard and Kris, you said something that I heard a lot of: complexity to simplification. If we could just draw a line from those in 2022 to 2023, a lot of CISOs would be happy, right? If we could do it. Right now, they're dealing with, some cases, 100+ vendors, very challenging, like you said, with all that attack surface growth we've had, all those vulnerabilities. It was all about put another Band-Aid on with another product. They don't quite have the budget anymore. And if you look in 2022, one of the comments I made was we saw almost 120 billion of M&A. And the number one category there was managed security services. And so I believe that that's really where it's gone. Do you agree with that? And you feel like that trend is company managed services to simplify?
Yeah, we see managed services the largest part of the market, the fastest growing part of the market. It also helps address some of that talent gap that you are going to cover later in the webcast. Outsourcing essentially the responsibility, but not the accountability, is what managed services is all about. So yeah, I think it's we're seeing more and more project-based work become managed service style work. A lot of companies maybe want to own the tech, but not so much the people and process side of it. So you're seeing this bifurcation from, maybe I'll buy the tech, it'll be in my cloud and I'll own the license, but can you come and give me the playbooks, give me the people to augment what I'm doing? Kris and I are working together on an alliance which we launched earlier this year, earlier 2022, that is exactly on this theme. How do you build in resilience around infrastructure with a cyber component, and essentially offer that as a platform, as a service, or as a managed service? So yeah, I think it's a huge opportunity, and really the only way the market can grow inexorably from this point.
Kris, say more about the partnership, if you would, too. I'd love to hear that and your vantage point on that.
Yeah. I want to just reflect on one thing though on managed services, because I think there's a dynamic here that we have to pay attention to that's going to be very important for the market moving forward. So one thing is, we are beginning to hear, particularly from the regulatory authorities, that the interpretation of the first, second, and third lines of defense model is changing. Now, this is important, and let me explain why. Once upon a time, and for some of you who don't know what that is, you should go look it up and figure out what the first, second, third line of defense is. But once upon a time, essentially it went something along the lines of, second line of defense is the organization responsible for identification of risk in the organization and then the selection of controls. First line protects the organization. They put in place the protections, they protect the organization. Third line checks. It used to be that organizations saw the SOC, the security operations, and what you would traditionally outsource as being a first line function. That is being reinterpreted by some authorities as a second line function. So what that means is that what we're seeing in a lot of organizations that had traditionally outsourced their security operations, they are insourcing that or insourcing pieces of it. Now, why is that important? Because it's changing the dynamic of managed services in the marketplace. How people see managed services is not the same way they saw it when I started 20, 30 years ago in building some of the first managed services. We used to, at that day, we used to say to our customers, great, we're going to come in with a stack of technology, we're going to drop it on top of you, and then we're going to manage that technology. Doesn't work anymore. Clients are saying, I've got my own stuff. And by the way, I want to buy my own stuff. I can't because the data localization, blah, blah, blah. All of this stuff is changing. So the managed services that they're conceiving is not the standard packaged managed services where we forklift a stack of technology into the customer environment. They're looking for us to help them in integrating the technologies they've already acquired or can be operated within their particular jurisdiction. So they're looking for us to kind of create the platform for them and then to enable them to co-source or outsource particular functions on top of that technology. But what they're not looking for us to do is take on 100% of the management of the infrastructure. Now, I know that this is very different because what that means for those of you who are out there that may be technology builders or providers, you've got to be thinking about how your technology integrates into the broader platform ecosystems so that the managed providers like us, like me, like Richard, we can integrate your technology into our stacks and then operate on top of that. The harder you make it for us to deliver managed services on top of your technology, the harder it's going to be for us to succeed. So, let me just say that just generally, but, regarding the kind of the relationship that we have, one of the things that we do really well at Kyndryl is we had a lot of engineers and we know how to integrate technology and we know how to operate that technology at a very, very fundamental infrastructure level. What we don't have is the security expertise, the business process level expertise that EY brings. So kind of the creation of the relationship allows us to solve problems for our customers end to end. So for instance, what Richard mentioned was supply chain optimization. Well, EY is the perfect partner to go to optimize your supply chain. What does that mean? How does it work? We're the ones that can come in and screw in the technology and then manage it for you on an ongoing basis. It's a very different kind of relationship, but one that allows us to, solve customers' problems, but in a very, very holistic way.
Music to my ears, Kris and Richard, to hear companies like EY and Kyndryl come together with the best of each of what you can do to create a solution of 1 + 1 is better. So little speed round if we can, just from the spirit of time. So quick questions for you. I got to ask, how do you feel about cloud transformation projects going into 2023? Are we going to see more, less, or the same number from 2022? What's your view on cloud transformation? Quick. Richard, to you first.
Well, I think more, there's industries that are now getting on board with this whole cloud piece, and that train has left the station. What I would say is there needs to be more thought and scope put into the security aspects of those transformations. You know, we're still trying to crowbar security in late in the game, and really that needs to be more of a sort of foundational area of scope when doing those transformations. But yeah, more.
Kris, what do you think more?
Again, I think it's going to be a little bit different. I think a lot of organizations moved to cloud and didn't get the ROI they were expecting. And the reason is because they didn't refactor their applications. So they just took the infrastructure, the legacy infrastructure, stuck it on the cloud. Now all of a sudden they're stuck with the bill. And by the way, now they've got not only the security complexity of managing the existing infrastructure, but now they've got the cloud complexity on top of it. So what we see is a lot of organizations that are not necessarily undergoing a new cloud journey. What they're doing is they're refactoring a lot of their legacy applications and making determinations about what's going on cloud, what's going to stay on-prem, what they're going to retire. And I think that retirement piece, it's like the Southwest incident or issues of the last couple of weeks. I think this underscores kind of the issues associated with technical debt. I think 2023 is going to be the year of retiring technical debt, which is kind of music to me in my ears. I've been talking about this complexity of legacy infrastructure forever. I'm hoping that this becomes the year where we realize that transformation gives us a positive path toward better security because it allows us to get rid of a lot of that old junk. Cloud is one of the ways in which we can improve, but you got to refactor your applications. Just sticking your legacy infrastructure on a cloud ain't going to get you to where you want to go.
All right, Richard, last question for you and then for Kris. Name two of the hottest tech areas you see in 2023. Is it OT? Is it, you know, sort of new areas of information management? Is it cloud? Is it like, where do you see the top two? Not the
I mean, I think that OT point you made is key. You know, I think with the increase in regulation in that space, a lot of security protocols now being applied to OT. You know, we're seeing a lot of companies building dedicated OT security operations centers, privileged identity in OT. I mean, these are huge areas of growth and of complexity from sectors that typically haven't, you know, really thought hard about security in the past. So yeah, I think that'll be a huge area of growth. We're starting to see some investment and thought being put into some of the emerging technology risks, so quantum in particular. You know, maybe 2023 will be the year that we start to see projects emerge to assess what will the impact of quantum be, even if that risk itself might be 3, 5, 7 years away. In reality, I think companies will start spending money on trying to understand that problem so they're not left with a Y2K type issue in a couple of years' time.
I'm looking forward to hearing from the VCs later on the quantum comments too, Richard. So great comment there. Kris, what about you? Top two?
Cyber resiliency and cyber resiliency. I think, you know, at the end of the day, what we see is just a ton of growth in organizations, you know, really focusing on this prepare to recover piece. They recognize that, you know, there's just the security risk landscape has gotten out of hand. And they're also seeing a lot of push from the regulatory authorities, et cetera. But the focus is on, you know, let's assume that you're going to be breached. Let's assume you're going to get nailed by a ransomware event. How are you going to recover your, you know, sort of minimum viable business services? And so we see a lot of investment in that particular area of data vaulting and, you know, sort of process orchestration and recovery capabilities.
Kris Lovejoy, Richard Watson, Happy New Year to you both. Thank you for coming on our show. I wish you the best. I can't wait to see you in person, and enjoy the slopes in Maribel. And Kris, we'll see you around hopefully soon. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Ciao.
Take care. Bye-bye.